Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. If you want to grow your business, start with strategy. Sounds logical, right? Figure out where you're going to go and then figure out what matters and what you need to do about it. I can honestly say that I used to say this and believe it, but that was before I understood the impact of the leader on an organization. In their leadership, in their self-awareness, then no amount of strategic planning is going to help the business grow because I'm going to give you lots of the becauses, but because you need a certain level of leadership development to make sure that not only you can execute the strategy, but also that even the planning stage is done well. So there's a problem when people start to try to create a strategy before they've been developed as leaders. And that's that they are part of the system that they're trying to fix. And when we're part of the system, then we're part of the development. And if we don't understand ourselves enough to actually get a great view of that system, then we're going to start making plans that aren't necessarily what we need. And none of us want to create extra plans or do work, especially improvement work and strategic work, that isn't actually what our business needs or what our teams need or what our processes need to get it done. So think about strategy as your map for, where you need to get to, because that's kind of what it is. But the leadership that is using the map or this path that you're taking, the leadership has to determine who's driving it, what vehicles you're going to use to get there, and whether you actually can get there or not. So if you can't plan, if you can't see all of that, and you don't understand how to drive, or you don't understand what vehicles are even options, then you're not going to be able to make an effective plan. So you wouldn't try to plan a route without understanding the possibilities of getting there. So you can't start to build a strategy for your business without understanding the leader first. So let's get into some actual reasons and help to describe why this is so important and why I like to keep talking about it, because I feel like I talk about it a lot, but maybe not enough in my podcast, but why I think it's so important for helping the success of your business. So first of all, leadership development changes the strategy you're going to create. So I mentioned self-awareness, but let's talk about leadership training and what leadership training really is and what it isn't. So most of the time when I say, oh, I do leadership training to people, they're like, oh, so you teach people how to delegate, or, oh, good, you can teach me how to do feedback, or how to communicate, or how to have this difficult conversation and hold people accountable and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yes, of course, we are going to learn those things. But the primary thing and the biggest gap that I think comes from a lot of leadership training, and I know my gap in a lot of my leadership training, was the lack of self-awareness that got put into it. So admittedly, we did like all of those personality tests. I think I did DISC. I definitely did Myers-Briggs. I did a FACET 5, an SI, and PI, and I don't know. I can't remember what they all are, or SD, I think it was. Anyway, I did the myriad of them, and yet I still didn't. That's not who we are. I've said this several times too, that you can line every single personality test and work level test side by side, and you still don't have a full picture, because there are all these other pieces that make up who we are. And it matters so much for how somebody shows up as a leader. Their how they grew up, how their family of origin developed their belief system. What are these things? Like, what are their geniuses? What are their frustrations? What work do they avoid at all costs, and why? Like, all of this has to come into play when we start talking about the strategy. So if we don't have a good understanding of who we are, then it's going to get in the way of having an effective strategy. So I think the best example would come in here around developing core values, because if you're developing a good strategy, it's going to include the values. Because so many times, like I talked to leaders, to potential clients, and even clients, and we start talking about like, I struggle with hiring the right people and the people that are, able to work in this environment and get along in this area. And that's where core values come in. So when a leader doesn't understand their core values, they're going to come into this strategic planning exercise and they're going to be like, okay, what are our company core values? And then you start listing like all the lovely things that you would like to be someday. And, they sound great. You've seen them probably on people's walls before. I know I did this. I think I've shared this story. I'm repeating myself a lot, but that's leadership too. When I was a plant manager, corporate told us we had to create our values and our value statements. And they said like have 10 of them. So I'm not sure where the 10 came from, but anyway, we had to create some kind of values, and there was no context to it. It was just like, create your values for your thing. And we created a great list, and it was like all this stuff that we should be, and we absolutely were not. We may have been a little bit of some of them and a little bit of this one, and definitely weren't that one. And we had this wonderful, beautiful list. We put it on the wall, and it did nothing for anyone because it wasn't us. It was not the core values of our business, and we weren't living them. And it just creates another barrier of trust or distrust, I guess you could say, between management and the employees, between anybody who walks in the door and knows us and everybody else. But it doesn't help, and it's not defining. And it doesn't help you hire the people that will actually work well and succeed in your organization and do things in the way that you want them done as the leader, or they need to be done to deliver the results that your company or your organization needs to have. And that self-awareness piece, to be able to understand, what are my values as a leader? What values does our leadership team encompass already? And is this how we already are operating? And is this how we want to continue to operate? So it just you have so much better clarity where you're coming from when you genuinely understand your own values coming in, and then you can apply those to your organization. And it's when you can clearly state what the values of an organization are, you can more easily hire the right people. You can more easily weed out the people that don't fit because they clearly don't meet certain values. And you can share that with customers, and you can share that with current employees who are going to come and bring in their friends who are great employees as well. And it becomes that much easier to train people to this standard when you can actually define it well, and it's something that you're living, and it is an actual core value. So that is my self-awareness piece there. The second part of self-awareness is that it's actually going to help develop what we call strategic anchors. So this is an important part in the 6 critical questions that I utilize to do strategic planning. And what these are, if you're not familiar, they are usually 3 things that act as a filter and are really how your company will succeed. So that's what these are. So it's a bit convoluted in how you start developing them in the process of it. But when it comes down to it, you start to see I'll do a very specific. So in mine, when I was winding down and trying to come up with my own strategic anchors, it's very clear that I love to support local. Like with my membership and, being on the board of Chamber of Commerce, with trying to just support local initiatives, create connections and community locally. Like that was very clear. So like that was a big portion of mine. So yes, I do tons of online stuff, but I want to be part of the local community because that is how I succeed. Like that is how I can improve the area in which I live. And that's very important to me. So if I were just kind of working with somebody else and wasn't aware of that about myself, I would just say, well, I do this mostly online sort of work. So local wouldn't even come into my vision of it. But because I've understood where I like to be and how that benefits me as a human, my community in which I live, and the people around me, like that is very important to me. So that became a strategic anchor for my company versus other virtual operating sort of companies. So that's kind of just to give you an example of that level of understanding helped me develop something more meaningful that supports my company in a different way and allows me to make decisions around how I operate and what works for me. So to give some other sorts of examples, let's say, without understanding who the leaders are, who's on this leadership team, it might be that, maybe somebody thinks local is important, right? But like the leadership, like does no networking whatsoever. They don't, get involved. They don't support the communities. So like to have a strategic anchor that looks like, hey, we want to support local, it doesn't make any sense. So having this understanding of who's leading this joint is going to clarify and give a better context for these strategic anchors as we start to move forward. So to sum it up, essentially, like when the leadership team doesn't understand who they are and who is having to execute the strategy, they tend to build strategies around who they think they should be because somebody told them to, rather than who they actually are. If a leader recognizes that they want to build a strategy around something that maybe they realize maybe something I don't have or do or understand today as well, but this is important for some reason, they have to understand that they're creating a gap. And they have to make a plan, like maybe their very first, what's most important right now is to create a plan to close that gap. So you have to figure out, okay, do we have to hire this capability? Do we have to develop it internally? Do we partner, make a strategic partnership with somebody, or is it just outside the realm of what we're capable of doing? So being able to honestly look at who you are and who your leadership team is, and then say, okay, well, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense for us, then that's hugely important. And that's going to create just so much better of a strategy than, just doing what we think we should be doing. So the third thing, when we've gone through some kind of people development, so leadership development, self-awareness training, however you want to call it, when we've gone through this, it actually improves the quality of the leadership conversation or the strategic conversation. So what do I mean by that? When we're creating a strategic plan, we have to have honest conversations. We have to be disagreeing productively and having conflict, but good conflict. We need people to say, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, or yes, this makes total sense, and we have to do it no matter what. So we have to be able to stand on these platforms and understand where we are and have these honest conversations so that we can have the best strategy come out of it. And that's real leadership, like to be able to have these conversations, to facilitate these conversations, or have a facilitator who's really facilitating these conversations well, so that we're getting the best plan and not just the plan that the leader says, right? I mean, if it's just going to be the leader creating the strategy, then great, I guess. But even the ability to challenge your own assumptions and have that conversation with a facilitator, have that conversation with a trusted partner of some sort, you need an honest take and an honest look. And if you're not developing yourself, learning about yourself, understanding who you are, you're probably not going to challenge these first assumptions. You're not going to have these great conversations, and you're not going to get to the strategy that's going to be the best for where your business is right now. So this brings us to number 4. Let's talk about execution. So strategy is completely worthless if it doesn't get done, right? It is a complete waste of time if you're not going to do the things, if you're not going to implement it. So if people aren't able to lead well, if they don't communicate the expectations, they don't follow up on the expectations, they don't train their people, they don't build trust and build relationships, then they're not going to even implement the best laid plans. So I say this a lot, but the best laid plans are worthless unless you're going to lead well to get them done, because so much of change depends on great leadership. I've been having some conversations with a client lately, and the struggle is this lack of communication. And they may have strategies, they may not have strategies, but the fact that she as an employee is not getting communicated to about the direction of things, like she can't make the change. And So what it creates is it creates disgruntled employees. It creates people that fight the strategy because, they don't get it. They don't understand it. You're not communicating it well. And they don't, like, maybe if you set your values to these, kind of mundane ones of respect everyone, then they're going to say, what does that even mean? You're going to miss the boat on execution of it. So even if you've created this amazing plan without being as self-aware as I believe you need to be, you're still going to struggle with the execution of it if you're not leading the team well. If you're not setting these expectations, you're not following up, you're not following and tracking the plan, you're not holding people accountable, you're not recognizing when they do the great things that you want them to do, and you're not supporting change in the way that change needs to get supported. All of that is going to get in the way of executing it. So we want to make sure we execute the time. We don't want to waste our 2 days away, do we? So number 5, this one is, rather than being like another reason, it's like a multiplier. And, I've talked about this several times, and that's because it's very important, but trust. So a lot of what you gain from training leaders, from being more self-aware, is the ability to build trust. Because if you say this and then do the opposite, whether you realize you're doing it or not, or whether you're trying to overcome something, you're breaking trust. So if you don't have trust, so once again, if you have like the best laid plan ever, you're going to roll it out to your team and they're not going to believe you because they don't trust you. Either, you've already broken their trust already, or you've just not shown that you're leading for them, or you've not shown that, these plans even make sense because you just don't have the relationship built. So much can be gained from creating this cohesive team first, and building some trust, and starting some leadership practices that are helpful in order to communicate this strategy well and to get the strategy put out there. So what I'm trying to get at is that leadership development isn't like an accessory to strategy. It's going to create the conditions on your team where strategy can work and where your strategy can work. And in this all, I think we've all heard I love the Peter Drucker, I think, said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is where trust comes in. If you have not built your culture into a way that you trust each other, where you as the leader trust the team to get things executed, and the team then trusts you to make the right decisions, then your strategy is going to go nowhere. If you're not upholding the behaviors that you set or the expectations that you set and giving feedback where it's needed, then your strategy is going to go nowhere. So you've got to be doing the things to lead well before you start the strategy. So this one is number 6 thing. I'm going to say it's more of a caveat to it, and it's a clarifier, I'm going to say. So leadership development doesn't have to be finished. And spoiler alert, it's never really finished. So this whole process is really just an act of continuous improvement. So, kind of like the chicken or egg cycle thing, you have to start somewhere. So if you have built a business and you've grown it from the bottom up, you used to do everything, and now you've grown it so much so you had to hire the bookkeeper, you hired the extra person to take the extra shifts and to build the extra thingies, and now you've got 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, and you've never done anything. You're like, okay, I got to start doing something because things are just kind of snowballing on their own. Start with your leadership. Start with yourself, because we don't have to be great leaders before we start strategy, but we have to start a process of leadership development. We have to start doing the things that are going to take us there, because that's building the groundwork for everything else that we're going to do. So people will see you start to grow. So if you start doing the leadership, then you say, okay, now we're going to do this strategy thing. They're going to see, oh, they're making an effort here. Now we're doing something a little different. I trust because I can see they're learning and they're doing things. Now they're executing the strategy. Okay, we've got this new idea, this new concept. And then as a leader, you continue to develop your leadership as you're executing the strategy. Because maybe that is part of it. Like maybe one of the strategic objectives is that you have to start doing one-on-one coaching sessions with everybody, because people need better communication and better development. And that's a whole part of it. So that just becomes part of what you're doing. And that is going to, like I mentioned, it's going to build trust with them, because sometimes part of trust building is being vulnerable. And sometimes that learning something new in front of other people and letting them see you learn something creates that vulnerability and it builds trust. It's like, gosh, they're learning. I can learn. I can do something new. I can do something different. And it actually increases buy-in. It improves relationships and it makes your strategy more successful. So instead of, like a lot of people will say, because a lot of people will say, oh, you must start with strategy because you got to know where you're going before you start training anybody. So instead of it going like strategy, identify that, leadership is a gap and then do leadership training, what we need it to be is that we do some leadership development. We get our strategy developed. So we do those 6 critical questions. Then we continue to develop the leadership as we execute the strategic plan and specifically what's most important right now. Then we look at the strategy again. We go to the next what's most important right now. And we continue to work that as we continue to develop the leader and develop more leaders within the organization. So it's this cycle that isn't like a complete rotating cycle. It's like a cycle that builds on itself. So if you're on the YouTube, you're seeing me make like a cyclone sort of ramp upwards because that's how it's going to be. You're going to get this like growth in your organization and it's just continues to cycle through the same basic steps, but they're going to get more and more advanced each time you do them, more honed in, better executed, and just overall better strategy. To wrap the whole thing up, the first question isn't what's our strategy? It's who are the leaders that are going to create and execute it? And how well are they capable of doing that right now? So that's what we need to ask first. Then we develop the strategy because that is what's going to give us a winning strategy that we actually stick with, that is meaningful and not a whole bunch of fluff words and gets done and makes you more successful. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, share it with a friend, share it with somebody who's been thinking about doing some strategy work and might want a little guidance or help in how to do that. And if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to just always reach out. You can reach me at KristinaSchmitt.ca, and I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.